What's going on, Knicks Nation? It is the off season, but it's a different feel this time. It's a different feel. We are the defending champions. And now we're usually, when we talk about the draft, and I'm a big draft head, and obviously we're going to talk about you and what you do. It's usually, who's going to be the, piece that can help us get to the next level and all this. But now it's like we can sit back and enjoy the process. So it's a beautiful feeling right now for Knicks fans all over the place. We enjoyed the parade yesterday. Everyone had a good time. It seemed like it was just wonderful. Vibes are great in New York. But my guest today, helping me, do a little preview of the NBA draft is my guy Al from No Ceilings. Al, what's going on, man?
You asked me right before, like when we came on, how are you doing? And I don't really know what to say. I can't really put it into words how I'm feeling right now. It all feels surreal. I think like everyone who's a Knick fan, it's a weird mix of emotions. It's a lot of joy. It's a lot of like, I don't like, I actually like cried a little bit when everything went down, thinking about like how I became a fan, thinking about my dad, thinking about my upbringing, all that stuff. So it's how am I doing? I don't know. But I feel awesome. I feel great. I feel electric. And like you said, the tenor of our conversations today is going to be a little bit weird. We're used to looking for either the next superstar who's going to lead the future of our franchise or like another piece that's going to be additive to finally get us over the hump. And now we're here talking about who else wants to be a part of New York Knicks championship culture? Who else is ready to be a part of the defending champs is where we're at now. So that's my long answer. I'm feeling great and I'm really excited to talk some draft.
Yeah, man, it really is a different feeling because this time it usually is stressful because either we lost in this round or we just came off a 50 loss 60 loss season and you're like, all right, who's going to be the next franchise player 2019? Are we going to get the number one pick? And we dropped the three. All right, RJ Barrett, is he going to be the franchise? Or even going back to when it's Porzingis at four and we had no clue who this guy was. Then he starts doing good and then he gets hurt and then we all know the fiasco that happens after that. But now it's crazy because they've had a lot of misses from the Knicks as far as we can go back to Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina, and a lot of guys that are not even in the league anymore, and the fact that the Knicks have been able to, get past that and build the team the way they've done unconventionally. Because listen, a lot of the great teams we've seen that win championships, they build it through the draft,
Yeah.
and the fact that they were able to do it the way they have, piece together, get these free agents here and do that. It's remarkable, especially like I said, a lot of the guys they picked were colossal bust, and like I said, we could go through all the names, but it's just a testament of what the front office is being able to do, be patient and really do their job, really well. And it's just I'm just like I said, super excited. I'm on cloud nine. Like I said, usually with the draft, you're trying to figure out, all right, who's going to be that. But this time it's like you sit back, you just enjoy, and like, all right, who's going to add to there's potential, back to back. And there's a lot of good players in this. But before we get into actually, with the Knicks and who they select, obviously this draft, Al, and you've been, you've done a lot of good work. You and your partner, Corey, who's been on the program before. Shout out to him and the great team at No Ceilings. But this draft is obviously is spicy. There's a lot of a lot of potential, top players, franchise game changing guys, for you. So, for you, how has it been evaluating, those potential, superstar level players in the in this draft?
I think number one, it's a really good question because the frame that we're looking at these players through is that we believe that a lot of them could be all NBA type of players, right? And so when we're talking about that level of a prospect, once you get to this part of the draft cycle, a lot of what we're doing is nitpicking. And I know a lot of people will hear that and be like, "Well, like, what's your problem? Like, why are you doing that?" But the reason why is because we're trying to figure out, is one guy going to be a 10-time, first team all NBA guy, or is the other guy going to be a 4-time first team All NBA guy. This is what we're potentially talking about, and the level that we're talking about when it comes to these prospects. So it's been a really big challenge, and it's been hard. And the wildest thing is, like, the biggest wild card that we have right now is that we're a mere days away from the draft, and we're hearing real smoke that things are not determined yet in terms of who's going to go number one. And then, depending on how that might shift, what happens at 2 and 3 and 4. And there's some wild names that we're hearing that could potentially go at 4, at 5, and at 6. So it's a tough, wild season that we're in right now, and the type of smoke that we're hearing about how teams feel about certain players. And then we have all of our like dark horse last minute guys who are rising up draft boards, where teams are meeting with late in the process and are getting swayed a little bit. All of that's happening too. So to answer your question, we really are splitting hairs right now, and especially on our end, independently. Like, we generally have an idea of what we feel about these players and where we think they're going to go. But this is the NBA draft. This is sports in general. Anything can happen. And the unfortunate thing for us is people who are trying to predict what's going to happen. It sucks that like days before the draft, we're hearing all this smoke about things turning and changing and people going all over the place for last minute meetings and all this stuff. So it's been wild. It's been a lot of fun still. But all I'm going to say is this. If you like the NBA draft, buckle up, because I think this first round is going to be wild, and we might see some stuff that we probably didn't think we were going to see even up to like a week before the draft.
All right, so obviously it's smokescreen season. You just mentioned that before, and we're hearing everything possible. Obviously there's teams that are going to use that to try to hopefully get their guy at a certain spot. They don't want to reach up too high or whatever. So what's the smokescreen that has your how Windhorse did the thumb with the what's the biggest one that has you really thinking a lot, the biggest smokescreen?
I mean, there's a lot. There really is a lot. We're hearing about, and like, I just don't want to say too much, just because
Mm-hmm.
we want to be respectful to our sources as well. But just like hearing about teams meeting with players late in the game. We just did a podcast with Kareem Lopez, who is a guy who people feel a lot of different things about. And when we did our pod with him, he was in a hotel room in Dallas. So you start doing some math and you start wondering, okay, he's with Dallas, and Dallas has the 9th pick in the draft. And then you start to wonder, right? And stuff like that. So there's a lot going out right now. But my biggest thing is this. I feel like regardless of all the noise, in my gut, I still feel like AJ is going to go number 1.
Yeah.
I really, really do believe that. But, um, supposedly Darren only met with them. And so who knows, right? Anything can happen, but I feel pretty good and strong about that conviction. But if it was me, honestly, AJ wouldn't be my pick at number 1, as much as I love AJ. And he's a guy that I've seen up close in person many times. I just saw him right before the combine as well. I think he's going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal NBA talent. But someone like Darren Peterson, like, I think he's just so tantalizing as a prospect. And my thing with him is, like, I know he had a weird season and everyone's talking about it, right? Weird season, didn't go out. He wanted it to go, blah, blah, blah. But he's a killer, man. And I think there is a attitude to him that makes a lot of sense for me. Reminds me a lot of guys like a Kawhi Leonard, like a Derrick Rose, not in terms of game, but in terms of demeanor and how he carries himself. And I think just because a guy doesn't talk a lot, isn't boisterous, isn't this loud, rah-rah guy, doesn't mean he doesn't care, and doesn't mean that he's not an absolute killer. So long answer, I know, but with everything out there, I still feel like AJ goes number 1, and I hope that's not like a crazy hot take.
No, it's not a crazy hot take at all. And you guys on the No Ceilings, make sure the guys check out noceilings.com. They do tremendous work over there. You guys have AJ going on to the Wizards. And he's obviously a tremendous prospect. It feels like it's like you can't really go wrong because he has the profile you want. He's 6'9", has the wingspan, is a bull, led the nation in scoring. So like taking him number 1, it's not like, oh, what are you doing here? Like, I feel like a lot of people kind of make it that way sometimes, but it's like, no, he was just as good as Darren. But obviously the thing with Darren Peterson is a lot of the off the court stuff, and I don't think he's actually maybe helped himself with the way he's kind of let people know about the cramping issues and just why he stop playing in certain games, and I think if you're one of these franchises who are trying to change, if you're Washington or you're Utah, you've been losing for a lot. You want a guy that's gonna help, get you back into contention and be, a legit team. You're gonna question him a lot. And I feel like with Darren, he's like the talent is, to me, the talent alone is number one pick. But the other things, I think that's maybe, but I still wouldn't be shocked if Darren Peterson goes number one. And like I said, smokescreen, all this, and like, hey, all this is he's number one. And then like I remember I just heard someone talk about it. It's like in 5 years we could just be like, remember when we were worried about the cramps and like all his motivation to play, and like now he's the best two guard in the league, and he's taking, he's an all-star, he's all this and that, and he's helping the Wizards or whoever, Utah, so like there's that part too, that like we can be going crazy over Darren stuff, the non-basketball stuff, and meanwhile it's just like, yeah, the same thing. Like it reminds me a lot of Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
Like we were so stressed about Anthony. Oh, does he really love basketball? Blah blah. And then like he's arguably, one of the best players in the league, and 2 out of 3 years took his team to the Western Conference Finals. So it could be that, but this is what makes the draft so much fun. Is like you're trying to figure out, and I'm sure with you guys, like you trying to figure out, like, all right, like this stat, like the team, like how he played in college, like all right, he did this and that, this player did this and that, but like, all right, was it the system? Was it, the competition? It's all that. So there's so many factors. Like, how do you go about like trying to figure out if this stat is real or that stat is fake, or like competition, is that real? Is that fake? Like, how do you go about that? Because that's really tough.
I think your question, number one, a great question, and I think it's you have to have that 30,000 feet in the air, bird's eye view, macro context of where you're seeing a player play at. So when we're specifically talking about a guy like Darren Peterson, something that we talk about a lot amongst ourselves at No Ceilings is that when was the last time Bill Self in Kansas pumped out like a top tier NBA prospect? I just we can't really put our finger on that. Maybe we're talking about Andrew Wiggins. Maybe he's the last one, and even Wiggins, right? Like the way that turned out. Eventually, he did go number one. But with Peterson, I think, okay, number one, everything that we've heard is like NBA teams are not worried about the off the court stuff. And I think things are shifting, like the tides are turning a little bit, where now team people are looking at it as like, oh, like it wasn't weird what happened at Kansas. He actually tried his best to play, even with all the stuff that was going on with his body that he couldn't really fully understand. And like we're all human beings. Like if things start to happen in our bodies that we don't understand, it's scary, right? And yet Peterson, he still fought through all of that and played the season. And a lot of those games, he wasn't 100%. And you could see it. Like it's not just a like word of mouth type of thing where we're just believing what he's saying. You could see it. Like if you compare his high school tape to what you saw in college, the vertical pop and athleticism is just not there in college, right? And then you go, okay, so what's wrong with him? Clearly, there's something wrong with his body. Like it's not that complicated. And when it comes to the off the court stuff, like everything that we've heard is that none of that's real. Like it's literally just smoke. Like he's a great kid, great work ethic. He wants to be great. And he fought his tail off to be on the court for Kansas in a system that wasn't really tailored for him, right? Like they threw him in the corner a lot and was like, can you be a floor spacer? And we're talking about a kid who was like the number one prospect in his class. So there's a lot to consider and a lot of different factors to consider. And I think that's why overall our consensus at No Ceilings is that most of us continue to have Darren at number one, because number one, he didn't get to show all of his capabilities at Kansas, but then also he had real obstacles that was keeping him from that. And the last thing that I want to talk about is like, I've seen out there people talk about like, oh, Darren Peters is a point guard. Uh, I really don't agree with that at all. Like I think Peterson has real playmaking ability. He's got a great handle of the ball, but I don't think that necessarily makes you a point guard. And especially in a day and age now in the NBA where we see so much fluidity and versatility be like such a important aspect of the game. I don't like this idea of trying to pigeonhole Peterson into a point guard. I think he's just an offensive engine, right? Whether that means he brings the ball up and he's getting you into your sets, whatever, or he's playing off ball and he can create on the second side. You have a strong side action, you get it over to him, and he's coming downhill, coming off a ball screen, floor spacing, hitting open shots, cutting to the basket. There's so much versatility to his game that I just don't understand why you would try to pigeonhole that into something that I don't think he necessarily is. I just don't see him as being a pure point guard. He's got good passing ability to him, but the value is that he's 6'6", long arm, athletic, and can do a bunch of different things on the offensive and defensive end of the floor. So this is why he's a special prospect and why he deserves to be in the number one pick conversation.
All right. So one more thing before we get into the Knicks draft talk. Jalen Brunson obviously just led the New York Knicks to an NBA championship. And obviously the undersized guard being the focal point, has been a topic of conversation before, Brunson won before he helped lead our New York Knicks to a championship. Are you on the side that for a guy like Darius Acuff, who to me he's the top point guard in this draft, he's special. I think he's an outlier from a lot of those smaller guards because I just think all three levels he's just amazing, and he's built like a Jalen Brunson, in a sense, just right-handed version. Do you think that Jalen Brunson being able to lead the Knicks to the championship, does that help Acuff, or do you still are on the side that we still got that's an outlier? We can't just buy the hype that now we can. So do you think this helps Acuff in a sense, or are you still indifferent about it?
I'm going to say yes and no. The reason why I say yes and no is because, to your point, Brunson is kind of a one of one. And the thing that I love about the story of Brunson is that he is a huge inspiration now to guards that are 6'2" and under, right? Everyone, obviously the Becky Hammond stuff, the Paul Pierce stuff, everyone was always saying, a lot of people, even guys like J.R. Smith and whoever, saying that, it wasn't really possible with Brunson. So yes, he is an inspiration to smaller guards. With Acuff, though, he is a little bit of a different type of player for me than Brunson. Like, Brunson is so effective around the rim, in the post, even as a small guard, the mid-range stuff. Not to say that Acuff doesn't have that, but Brunson has it at such an elite level with the balance of the footwork, him playing off too. He's so good at that and getting the guy off on his hip and, creating off of that. Not to say that Acuff can't do that, but then also, like, Acuff is a freak. Like, he's a guy that I got to see, obviously, at the Hoop Summit before, and then right before the Combine, saw him at P3. And I think I said this to you on your pod, but like, seeing him at P3, it looked like he had taken the Captain America Super Soldier Serum. Like, he was absolutely ripped. Like, his arms looked like they were going to pop. He's just in great, great physical shape. But on top of that, also Brunson, when he came in, and this is something that Corey says all the time, like, Brunson came in at 200 pounds, right? And Acuff's at right about 180 right now, but also Brunson came in with some years in college, so Acuff can get there. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't have Acuff as my PG1, but I have him top 10, obviously. I think at the same age and at the same stage of their developments, man, Acuff really showed some mature playmaking this year as a freshman. And coming into his freshman season, there were kind of questions about that. Was he just going to be this ball hog who's going to take all the shots, blah, blah, blah? That wasn't the case at all. He was a really good playmaker for that team. And obviously, he's probably the best lob thrower in this class with his ability to do that. So, Acuff's a little bit more of like a playmaker. But he's another versatile guy. Like, they had him running off pin downs and screens all over, and he can shoot off the dribble, off the catch, off movement, and then he can pass. So there's a lot there. I just don't think his free throw line in is at the level of Brunson, maybe 2-3 levels below Brunson, in my honest opinion. But Brunson is the inspiration. And if you're an NBA team that believes in Acuff, then you look at Brunson and you go, maybe we can help him develop to get to some facsimile of that.
Yeah. And one thing I love about him too is he just has that dog in him. Like, he has that in him. And that's why I think he's going to have success in this league. Whether, how far he goes with these all-star or NBA that's one thing. But I'm really confident he's going to be a pro for 8 for 10 plus years. Like, I'm confident that he's just going to be at least at worst, he's a microwave guy coming off the bench. But I'm very confident he's going to be good. I know the defense is kind of suspect,
Yeah.
but you built, listen, it's like Brunson. Brunson isn't, you're not Gary Payton out here. But if you build the right pieces around him, he
Yeah.
could do some things. So that's going to be interesting to say. All right, so let's get into it. We talked about a lot of these guys on my pod. So, well, obviously, let's talk about, we got the 24th pick, we got 31 to 55. We're going to talk about a couple of three guys at 24 that could possibly be there, for our New York Knicks. Like I said, it's still a great feeling knowing that we don't got to stress too much about, the draft and this. We could, chill. But this guy, when we talked about, Zubi Ejiofor, he is obviously a name that a lot of Knicks fans have been, if you're from the New York area, you know about him. St. John's, what he did the last few years, just being an absolute bulldog, for the Johnnies and helping them, have a lot of success these last few years. But Zubi is a guy who's has the measurables, had a tremendous combine with the shooting splits. He was, you would have thought he was Dirk out there. He looked great. So Zubi Ejiofor, at potentially at 24, how do you feel about Zubi Ejiofor potentially being a New York Knick?
A couple of things. Number one, it's starting to feel like he might not be there.
I know. No. At one point, he was like mocked, not with the 24th pick with the Knicks. It was like 31. Yep. Or even going lower, in the 30s. Now, like I told Knicks fans too, I'm like, I don't know if he's going to be there at 24. He might go higher, especially with all the guys that are going back to school and stuff. That just made his stock go up.
Yep. That's real, and it's starting to feel like if he gets there at 24, we'd be really lucky for the Knicks to get him. I think with Ejiofor, it's easy. Like the basic thing will be like, oh, St. John's, local kid, like, bring in the local kid. Sure, like I can understand that the Knicks have seen him a ton. The more important thing with Ejiofor is that he fits the culture of what the Knicks are building. The Knicks are built off of team winning, right? Sacrifice, playing hard, playing with toughness. Ejiofor is literally all of those things. He's a guy who, if the Knicks were to draft, obviously he's going to be a second unit big. And what he's going to offer defensively with his versatility, him being 6'9" with the wingspan that he has, the ability to move and guard multiple positions. He's a guy who, if he has to go out there and guard a smaller guy, he can do it. He's got that type of lateral mobility. Offensively, he's grown so much as a playmaker. He doubled his assist averages this past season. He's at like just under 4 a game. A guy who, once again, like as a second unit guy, being a backup big for the New York Knicks, you kind of have to do the small things right. You got to be able to screen well. You got to be able to rebound. Got to protect the rim, play defense. Ejiofor does all that stuff. And so in terms of like the Knicks getting a 6'9" guy who's versatile on both ends of the floor, who has real shooting potential too, like as I'm saying it out loud, I keep convincing myself he's just not going to be there at 24 because he's such a well-rounded prospect who is mature, and teams in that range from, to be honest, 14, maybe even higher, but like 14 to 18 to 20, they're going to want a player like this, whether they want him to be like a bolster to their second unit or a guy to, be a starter for them, who's going to bring a ton of toughness and versatility. So I love Ejiofor, and if I were the Knicks and he was there at 24, I'm absolutely sprinting to the podium to take him. But I'm starting to feel like he's not going to be there.
And that's usually what happens with the Knicks. The players you love, and Knicks fans, the player you love, and you're like, all right, this is going to be our guy, and he goes a pick before. That usually tends to happen. And then the Knicks haven't shown, especially on the Leon, that they're willing to trade up. Like if their guy isn't there, there are a couple guys aren't there, they're not going to trade up for that guy. They stick to their guns, and they trust their board. And if he's not there, they've been shown. I mean, a few years back, they traded out from 11 with Thunder, and completely not even the first round. They just got out of the first round because their guy wasn't there. So they've shown, in the past, under Leon, that they're going to trust their board. If their guys aren't there, we'll just move back. And obviously we just heard, from James Dolan, he's not going under the second name. They're not doing that. So this isn't, like I said, I don't think the Knicks are going to use all 3 picks, and we talked about that on my pod. I don't see that happening, but under circumstances, we'll talk about it. But I definitely see a scenario if there few guys we're going to talk about aren't there, then they'll punt out of the first round potentially altogether, and just try to get value in second round and just like it also seems like they draft better in the second round than they do in the first round because a lot of the first round pick. I mean, they signed RJ Barrett and then they traded him, so that was the first guy since like Charlie Ward in the first
Yeah.
round they re-signed. So, but Zubi Ejiofor is somewhat, and in your guys' mock draft, you have him going to the team we just beat in 5. The San Antonio Spurs, which that would be I hate to say it, that would be an absolute perfect fit for them.
Yeah.
That's they could have used a guy like Zubi Ejiofor, potentially. Maybe we're talking completely different right now, if that's the case. But he's definitely his stock has risen so much since the combine. So crossing fingers. I think if we hear his name with 24, I think Knicks fans would be elated. But like you said, he's risen a lot, so we don't know if he's there. But another guy that, as a Duke Blue Devils fan, he crushed my heart because he just absolutely was just a bulldozer for UConn and helped them, come back from a massive lead, versus my Blue Devils. And that's Terrace Reed Jr., who's built like we talked about it. He's built like an ox. So Terrace Reed potentially being there. He's another guy who's risen too. It feels like he was a guy maybe in the second round. And, since that, that game versus Duke until the combine, he's risen a lot. So talk a little bit about Terrace Reed potentially, of being a New York Knick.
Yeah, I mean, Terrace Reed, a guy who started his college career at Michigan, eventually transferred to UConn, and a guy who really needed his time in college to develop. And I think with him, he makes a ton of sense for the Knicks, whether they're there at 24. I don't think Reed makes it to 31. I mean, to be honest, with the way that his stock is going, he might not even be there at 24. He might be another guy who goes
Another
before
guy.
the Knicks at 24. But a guy who became an absolute monster around the rim, dominant, finishing everything around the rim, but also really grew as a passer. This past season, he had a 17.8% assist rate for a guy who was just looked upon as this big bruising center. But he was able to do that, and you saw that in the tournament and the run that UConn had. He really was able to showcase his ability, obviously, to be a screener coming downhill, finishing at the rim, but also his ability to protect the rim and play defense and pass the ball. These were things that he really needed to improve upon during his time in college, and he became a really, really important part of UConn's success. And now, when it comes to specifically the Knicks context, we don't know what's going to happen with Mitch, right? This is kind of the $1 million question of our offseason. What do we do with Mitchell Robinson? And if it becomes a situation with what Dolan has set out to the public, if we can't bring Mitch back, then Reed becomes that much more enticing because he's got good size. Like physically, he is already ready for the NBA. And another thing, Corey got to spend some time with him out in New Jersey, watching him in workouts, whatever. He might be a shooter, which is kind of the wild thing too, where he might eventually develop into a decent shooter. And that's something right now with the league where guys who can shoot from the outside, especially bigs who can shoot from the outside, become very valuable because you're adding an extra wrinkle when you have to cover ball screens and all that. So I think with Reed, I'm not saying he's going to be a shooter, but it's a part of the equation. And if he adds that with his size, the fact that he finishes everything around the rim, the fact that he's a rebounder, the fact that he's become a much better defender during his time in college, the Knicks would be really ecstatic, I think, to get him. And whether he's going to be their backup big or a third big, whatever role he comes into, I think he'll be ready. And the fact that he spent time in college makes him that much more enticing for a team like the Knicks, who might not be looking for a project when they're drafting a big. And I don't know. I might be in the minority when I say this, but I know Hukporti had some really great possessions in the finals and he did some good stuff. I'm still not a big Hukporti guy. I just don't really love some of the processing stuff with him at times. And like, I wish he was like a slightly better rebounder and all that stuff. I know he gets blocks and all that stuff too, but even defensively, so prone to fouls and silly mistakes. And so, I don't know. I would lean heavier towards the Reed minutes rather than Hukporti if they're both on the squad. But yeah, that speaks to how good of a season Reed had and how important his development was over the last 4 years in college.
Yeah, and why the first two guys I talked about were going big centric. It's like we mentioned before, Mitchell Robinson's impending free agency, and like we said, James Dolan said not going to second apron, and that's going to be a big thing, And I think even with that, even if they did bring Mitch back, I still think, like you said, Huck has moments. He had some nice block shots, but then there's two fouls in a couple minutes, and there's still some feel that he's still working on. Like I said, he's only a second year, so second year in the league, right? So he's
Yeah.
still figuring some things out. But having another big, we've seen this. You need size in this the NBA. You need guys who are bold. You need strength, and a guy like Reed is. I mean, like I said, he's gigantic, and listen. I talk about this religiously with the Duke. He was a big reason why that game UConn wasn't down by 40 in the first half instead of just being down 20 because they just gave it to him. And even when they were down 16, he get a couple buckets here and make it 12. Like he just kept, just chipping away and kept them from, like I said, getting blown out the door by Duke. So that to his game. And like I said, he's just a bulldog, bro. He is massive, massive, 6'11", 260. Like he has the NBA body. So that's things I like a lot about him. So we'll see what happens regarding that. But the mid situation is going to be interesting. But we're going to get off the bigs and we're going to talk about a guy who's been, he's worked out for the Knicks and been the focal point of Knicks draft Twitter, and that's Malik Thomas. He's another one that is really, an intrigue, and he played with Acuff, so he's
Yeah.
used to playing with a ball dominant type of guy, but he's another one that's very intriguing, can do a lot of good things, on the court, has the size, can get stronger too, which but one thing I want to talk to you about him, because I feel like I've seen a lot of mixed feelings about his defense. I've seen people say they don't believe in it at all. Then I've seen people say I think he could be a serviceable defender. So what that to me is the biggest takeaway for me is I've seen up to 50-50 on his defense, whether you think he's gonna be good or not. How do you what's your thoughts on that?
Um, I think okay. I think both sides are fair, but for me, and we're talking about this from like a Knicks specific lens,
Hmm.
if the Knicks were to draft Malik Thomas, they're not going to ask him to play a ton of minutes. And what's more important is that he's coming into a culture where the Knicks play good defense, and we have a lot of really good defenders. And so my thing is, if you have some questions about Malik as a defensive processor, right, with his IQ, his team defense, his off-ball defense, I'd feel great about putting him on the Knicks and having him learn under guys like Mikal Bridges, who, like Malik, isn't the strongest of build, but has figured out a way to be a really good defender, right? Learn under OG Anunoby. That's good.
Good
Deuce
person to learn.
McBride, Josh Hart. There are a lot of great mentors on this team to help him become a really good defender or even a serviceable defender. And for me, it's like, I think he'll be just fine. Like he was a freshman this past season, playing on a team where, defensively they had some moments. And I think with Malik, like I'm not drafting him to be my lockdown defender either.
Yeah,
The real conversation you need to have with Malik is the type of offensive player that he is, right? And he is a fearless, versatile, lights out type of shooter, right? And when I watch Malik, honestly, I get a lot of like J.R. Smith vibes to him. Not that he's going to be that he's the type of athlete that J.R. Smith is, but think about the role that J.R. Smith played with the Knicks when he was on the Knicks, right? He was like a secondary, tertiary type of option, a guy coming off the bench, giving you real energy, ball handling. The thing that people may not know about Malik Thomas, because maybe you only saw him at Arkansas, in high school, he handled the ball a ton. He was a guy that we got to see at the Nike Hoop Summit. He played for the Portland Generals, and he came in, and the Portland Generals are a team that they create to kind of scrimmage against the Team USA and the World Team. And he came in like a dog. Like he wanted all the smoke. He came in ready to fight everybody, and not in a bad way, like in a basketball way,
yeah,
right? Like he was really taking the game seriously. He's really competitive, and a guy who, in his freshman season, as you mentioned, next to a ball dominant guard, kind of took a back seat. and was like, he was the main guy in high school. He came into freshman season, was like, I'll play a role. I don't care. It reminded me of Devin Booker before the 24 Olympics, when they're like, someone on Twitter was like, oh, you need someone to be the glue guy playing next to LeBron. And then Devin Booker tweeted out, I'll do it. Right. That was Malik Thomas. Malik Thomas in his freshman season for Arkansas was like, I'll play a role. I'll be a floor spacer. I'll do whatever you need. And he averaged 15 points a game as a freshman. Right. And once again, he's a guy who can do more stuff with the ball in his hands. And so for the Knicks at 24, you get a guy like him who you're just kind of scratching the surface with his offensive ability. And then defensively, you have the infrastructure and the context you want to help him become a good defender. That's a bet that I would feel very, very comfortable taking. And I'm not even slightly worried about that.
Yeah, and he kind of has that J.R. Smith kind of spunk to him, unless you see Marty Collins, you don't that, but still a memorable moment in MSG. The bad times. Those are some of the bad
Yeah.
times. But he has that, and like I said, I like like you mentioned, he had the ball in his hand a lot in high school and adapted. And I love guys who buy in. I know it's very hard. I think we kind of like we don't understand like how tough it is to have the ball in your hand and then go to college and now you're the third, fourth option. That's tough. And he bought in and he was able to play his role perfectly, and that's why I feel like he would come into New York and be tremendous. And then he shot the three ball well. Did a lot of good things. And I think defensively, like he was guarding a lot of the best defenders too, offensive players. And in New York, he's not going to be tasked to go guard SGA and from the jump. He's going to guard. He's going to be coming off the bench. He's going to guard the second unit guys. And I think he could do a solid job doing that. So that's definitely he's been someone I think Knicks fans have heard a lot in the last few weeks, and I think an intriguing name. We could definitely if there is things we do need, obviously maybe a big if Mitch is gone, but some wing depth in the second unit, get a little bigger, positional size in the second unit. I think that can be something we can definitely look into. But in your mock draft, and you guys do a community mock draft with guys in no ceilings, you had Cole Pete at 24. And we talked about him in my pod, and he's a name that could potentially, fall because, didn't have the greatest combine and kind of a tweener-ish. So you have him in your latest mock draft, Knicks taking Cole Pete. Talk to me about Cole Pete potentially there.
I think for the mock draft, I did the write-up too for that pick. And for
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
yeah, and for me, the rationale is like, you kind of you're kind of grabbing onto like a falling star a little bit here in this situation where Kopi came into college as a highly touted freshman, a guy who, Arizona was looking at to kind of be their front line, headline type of guy. And he ended up kind of just playing a role. Although he came out hot, like early on in the season, had a 30-point game, blah, blah, blah. But eventually, like, he kind of became a part of that team, right? And he really let Braden Burries do his thing. And they had Karchenkov and Jaden Bradley and Krivas. That was a loaded roster. And he really was down to like play a role. And the thing with Pete that I love is that he's NBA ready in terms of his physicality.
Yeah,
He's a guy that plays really tough. Obviously, the bloodlines, NFL offensive lineman in his family, like he's got great genes. And so he's a guy that I'm looking at as he's kind of like this. Maybe he's like a little undersized as a 4, but a guy who's going to play really physical, a physical brand of basketball. And guess what? The Knicks play a physical brand of basketball. The thing that I hated about the NBA Finals is that everyone wanted to talk about how physical the Spurs were, and I'm like, are you guys crazy? Like, we have Jalen Brunson, the most physical guard in the league. We got OG Anunoby, probably the most physical wing in the league. We got Josh Hart, who lives and breathes off of physicality. Mitch Robinson, Karl Anthony Towns. Everyone wants to clown on Towns, and yet you look at him and he's an elite rebounder, which I'm sorry, guys, but you got to be physical to be an elite rebounder. And he plays through contact, gets downhill, takes 1 million free throws per game. So you're absolutely tripping if you think that Karl Anthony Towns is not a physical player. Anyway, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. The Knicks are a very physical
Let them know,
team.
Al. Let them know, Al.
Yeah, we're an extremely physical team, and all they wanted to talk about was the Spurs. Koa Pete fits right in. He plays a physical brand of basketball. He's a guy who doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time. I get it. for everyone who's catching up now to the draft, you're going to look at some of the videos at the combine and watching Koa Pete shoot. That stuff's terrible. Like your eyes will bleed from watching it, but you have to understand the context. Like his agency wanted him to reform the jumper. You know, they wanted him to start from the bottom up, and the timing of the combine was just not good timing. You know, and he was, you know, early on in the process of reconstructing the jumper, so it looked terrible. What the final product will look like, I don't know. Where it's literally a coin toss. It could be awesome, or it could be the worst thing ever. Nobody knows because he's in the process of reconstructing all that. So that part I get is scary. But if you talk, look, back in the fall, a lot of people were mocking him in the top 10, and there were some people mocking him in the top 5. And
Yeah,
for the Knicks at 24, for the Knicks at 24 coming off a title, you grab a guy with that type of pedigree who you know is not an ego guy, is a selfless player who's also a good passer that I forgot to mention. Adding that type of culture piece to a team that cares so much about culture and toughness, that's kind of a match made in heaven for me.
And he fits the, like you said, he fits the culture because he's strong.
Yeah.
He's strong. And I just feel like the Knicks are just gonna, we have an identity now, right? And we have championship identity, and we showed it, and it's physicality. And that's one thing you listen, the Cole Pete, the shooting and all that, obviously that's a thing, but one thing he's physical.
Yeah.
So he would come into this New York Knicks team being ready to, to throw bows. He's gonna throw bows, and that's the one thing you'll get out of him. Yes, but if you can eventually get him in a few years to extend the shot and get it going. I mean, like you said, beginning of the year, he was mocked. He was the 5th guy, right? We all know that the top 4, the big 4, the 4 horsemen, and he was like, hey, people were like, oh no, there's a 5th one. There's a 5th horseman. So like, to get that at 24 would be any. Listen, he was a part of Arizona's great form to the Final Four. Big part of that. So like he's someone that if you get him around in this range, I mean that's absolutely tremendous. So obviously we got 31, the 31st pick too, which is I think a very good pick to have, first pick and then the second round. Throw me some names that you like that could potentially be there. We talked about, like on my pod, we talked about like Onyenso, the big man. If all the bigs are potentially go, there's still some, you can get some quality bigs. And if you don't know Onyenso, he did, bring back my Duke Blue Devils again in the ACC championship. He blocked like 7 of the potential number 2 or 3 pick in Cam Boozer shots. Like he gave him trouble, in that game. So that's one. So throw me some names that you potentially like if in that 31 range.
Well, first off, like you bringing up Onions is important, right? Because I felt like he might be there at 53, and now I'm not sure, right? Like he might go a little bit higher. So maybe you got to reach a little bit at 31 and take him there. But a guy, to your point, averaged 3 blocks per game, he had like a 2% steal percentage too, which is important for a big like him. He's not just like a pogo stick in the paint who's just going to try to block everything. He's a real defender, a real deal defender, 6'11", giant, powerful. Like there's a lot to like about him, and a lot where you kind of go like, okay, if we lose Mitch, maybe Onyenso becomes our guy that we kind of invest in, and he becomes our next Mitch as like, he offensively, there's pretty much going to be nothing there other than have him set hard screens and be a vertical threat at the rim. But defensively, he's going to give you a lot. A couple of names that I'm thinking of there, I tried to get like a good batch here of guys that I've been thinking about. The first one, you mentioned some size on the wing, and there are 2 guys that I think could be interesting options, but they come with their warts too. And the first guy is Alex Karaban. Karaban's not my favorite player in this class, but look, he's a winner. And the thing that we're learning about winning is that like there is a gene to it. There are guys that just know how to win, and I think with Karaban, he's won so much in his time in college, and the fact that he's a pretty decent shooter, a guy who I think he was right around like 35-36% from outside, but he's one of these connective players, right? And if you're looking at him at 31 to be a bench piece, a guy who when you throw on the floor, he's going to know what to do, decent passer, decent rebounder, going to be able to space the floor, handle the ball a little bit. He's just like an interesting wing option to a team that cares about winning, and he could just add to that winning culture. So I get it. It's not the most exciting prospect, but he also played a ton of minutes at UConn the last couple of years. And I think that's important because The Knicks play their guys a lot. I know a little less under Mike Brown, but still, like that cardio, I think is a big part of things, and I think Caravan definitely has that. A big option at 31, who is not my favorite option, but is an interesting option, I would say, is Henry Vesar from
Yeah, a
North
lot of people in the
Carolina.
chat have been talking about Henry Vesar.
Yeah, Vesar's interesting, right? I think my biggest gripe with him is I just don't think he's a good rim protector. And I think the Knicks, when they look at their bigs coming off the bench, that's something that they value. Obviously, being a vertical threat at the rim, hard screener, all that stuff. But I just don't love that part of him. I also think he's slightly overrated as a shooter. The reason why I feel that way is like I know he shot 40% from three this past season, but it wasn't like crazy volume. And I mean, he's also a center, so you understand that. But also, like, I don't like the fact that he was in the 60s as a free throw shooter. Like, that is generally not a good shooting indicator, and that scares me a little bit. So I just don't know if I'm not saying that Vesar's a bad player. I just don't know if he's a fit with our system. If he's a fit for what we're looking for our bigs to do, I just don't think that's the cleanest fit. And so I would pick other guys. Like I'd much rather have Terrace Reed over him, obviously Zuby over him. Like that's kind of how I feel. Another option. Now, my concern with him is that he's not much of a defender, but Tyler Bilodeau is a name that's really moving up boards right now. A guy who is 6'8", 6'9". He's probably 6'9" in shoes, but he just has the jumper of Allen Houston in a 6'9" body. It's just he really struggles defensively, and he's a guy who, me living in California, I got to see him play at UCLA all the time, and being there in person, watching Coach Cronin just absolutely eviscerate him after misassignments on defense, like time after time, like seeing that so many times, I'm like, uh, the Knicks might not love that, but the fact that he is 6'9", can shoot the way that he can, and he's not just a standstill shooter from three. Like he can shoot from the mid range. He can catch it in the mid post a little bit and do some stuff. Not that the Knicks would ask him to do that a bunch, but he's got some ability to do that. The last guy I mentioned at 31, and he's a guy that I don't know if a lot of our fan base is talking about, but Ryan Conwell from Louisville is a guy that I think deserves more attention. The thing about Conwell, he's a gamer, dude. Absolute gamer. Had a weird college career playing at a bunch of different schools, but a guy who shot the ball really well before this past season for Louisville. And so teams will be like, okay, so why did his shooting fall off a little bit, where I think he dipped to like 34% this year? But if you watch the film and you watch the tape, he took way harder shots this year. When Michael Brown Jr. was hurt and he was out, Conwell took a big brunt of that responsibility to be a playmaker, to be a scorer. He had the ball in his hands a lot more this year, especially when Michael was down. But a guy who just, I just see him as a really tough guard who can shoot the ball and will be a better shooter as a pro. And something that's not being talked about right now is that we went to P3 Sports Labs here in Santa Barbara before the combine. We got to see all the WME guys, and Conwell was there. And when we talked to the P3 guys, they were like, you guys will be surprised, but Conwell was one of our best athletic testers here. And we were shocked to hear that, because like when you look at Conwell, you don't really think of him as this like run jump athlete, but he's got some unorthodox athleticism to him that's pretty special. That's pretty great. And they were big fans of him. And so with Conwell, I'm looking at him at 31. He could be an interesting bench option as a guy who comes off the bench, hits some shots for you. We don't know what's going to happen with Shaman. Don't know what's going to happen with Alvarado. He's got a player option for $4.5 million. Conwell could be an interesting option as a guy who, once again, played a long time in college, can give you a little bit of a lot. And so I think he's an interesting option.
Another guy that's been, in Nick's Twitter sphere that's been talked about a lot is Isaiah Evans. I watched a lot of him, and we talked about J.R. Smith a lot. He's kind of in that realm where, you can go 7 for 10 from three from him, or you can get the 1 of 10 from three for him, but he ain't afraid to shoot it. No. He ain't afraid to shoot that thing. So, talk to me about Isaiah Evans, because he's a very interesting prospect. Obviously, had a very, showed some flashes as a freshman, but then obviously this year he definitely, upped his volume and did some really solid things for Duke. So talk to me about him potentially.
I actually thought Evans could have came out after his freshman season. I think he could have came out and gone in the 20s. Like I
I think
really
he
thought,
went higher potentially last year than he would go this year. Like there's a
right.
chance he could go in the second round potentially. I don't think so, but there's a chance. But I think last year he that with his stock, I think he kind of would have went in the 20s for sure.
Yeah, I think part of it is like in year two, his shooting efficiency came down a little bit. But even to that, like, I think he's a real deal shooter. I'm not worried about it at all. Like, when you watch him shoot the mechanics on it, and he shoots like a really soft ball where it looks like, oh, like this guy can really, really shoot the ball. And so I have like mechanically, it looks great. And to your point, whenever we do like player film breakdowns with players and we do them with like shooters, all of them say the same thing. The most important thing for a shooter is confidence. And that's something that Isaiah Evans has in spades. He's not lacking confidence at all. He knows that he's a shooter and he's going to let it fly all the time. And so, him being a decent wing option for the Knicks makes a lot of sense. Now, people will look and be like, he's skinny as hell. Like, how is this going to make sense? Now, that's when I'll pump the brakes on you and let you know he might be skinny, but watch the film. Kid plays hard, man. Like defensively, he gets after it. And he's a guy that I understand he has some limitations in terms of his frame, but I like him as a defender. Like I think there's real upside to him as a defender and a guy once again who plays really hard. And my thing is like if your biggest deficiency is that you're, a young man who's skinny, but you play really hard and can shoot the cover off the ball and can do a little bit of the stuff with the ball in your hands, I'm not worried about that. Like you're gonna gain weight 100%. Like whether you eat more or you're in the NBA gym, you're gonna gain weight. So I feel 100% confident that Isaiah Evans, if he's there, let's say the Knicks go Zuby at 24, right? God smiles upon the Knicks once again. Zuby's there at 24 and Evans is there at 31. The Knicks take Zuby and Evans at 24 and 31. What are we talking about? Like that's an A+ draft for the Knicks coming off of a championship. So I'm right there with you. I think he's a really interesting option, and I'm not worried about that little dip in shooting efficiency this past season because I think mechanically he's a real deal shooter.
Yeah, and what, especially with him and Sar last year at Duke, they were just pit bulls. And if you add him along with Mikal, Deuce, all these great defenders, OG, he's just gonna get better. I'm still upset that he didn't put the hand up, quick enough, in that last shot. But I forgive. I'm over it. Not really, but I'm trying. It's hard. But he's definitely someone that I mean, like you mentioned, that pairing potentially of Zuby at 24 and Evans at 31 would be an absolute home run for Knicks. But a few more things before I let you go. We're here with Albert from No Ceilings, does tremendous work over there, co-host with Corey Tuluba, who's been on the program before. But obviously, 55 is, there's a lot of people can be like, it's a throwaway pick, whatever. But I still think you can get some type of value with this, on a two-way contract potentially. So I'll throw you one name before you go. And I might get some trouble with this as far as obviously Jalen Brunson was a second round pick. And everyone's going to try to figure out, like, same thing with Joker, right? Who's going to be that second round steal? And I'm not saying he's going to be Jalen Brunson. I'm not saying this, but he has a lot of the Jalen Brunson-ish to him that if there is that Jalen Brunson type player that you could find in the second round, this guy could be it. And that's Bruce Thornton. And I'm very intrigued to see how you feel about him. But I'm not saying he's going to be Jalen Brunson. That's one thing I want to say. But if there is that type that could potentially be that, and if you can get him at 55, well, better person to learn from than Jalen Brunson. Talk to me about that, because I don't think you got the same vibes with me, but that's just me just throwing a Hail Mary there.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it because the one thing we know about Bruce Thornton, he's a bucket.
Yeah.
And I think with him, there's I don't know, maybe after listening to you, maybe I'm buying in a little bit because the value proposition at 55 is like, I get it. It makes sense. Like, we're not talking about spending a first round pick on him, but potentially getting him at 55. Because, like, I just don't think he's a perfect player, obviously. And, like, I don't want to say he's small because our captain is small, but, like, that's part of his eval as well. He's probably listed at, like, 6'1", right? So, I get it. He wouldn't be my pick, is what I'll say. But at 55, like, does it really matter? Like,
that's what I'm saying. Why not?
Yeah.
If that's what I'm saying. At 55, we're the defending champs. at 55, we can do whatever we want. We want to pick whatever. We want to this guy, we can do whatever. But I'm just saying, if I'm just gonna go crazy off the wall, I that's just if there is that Jalen Brunson type in the second round, that underrated guy that maybe not on the Knicks, maybe he goes somewhere else. And I don't. I just love the. I just think he's just a bucket getter. He's just so good. I just think he could be that potentially. I could be wrong, and I'm fine with that. But I just feel like at 55, he could be that potential steal.
I'll say this. I don't hate it at all. And once again, like if you miss a 55, you miss a 55.
Exactly.
You're going to sleep well at night. It doesn't matter. But I'll give you a counter. I have a guy who I think I really like, who isn't being talked about enough, who played for a major program, played in the Final Four, a guy who coming into the season I wasn't the biggest fan of, but by the end of it, I bought in full time, like all the way, is Jaden Bradley, a guy who played for Arizona, a guy who started his career at Alabama, had to transfer even in his first season at Arizona, was kind of, what is he? Is he going to shoot it? Is he just a defender type of guy? Blah, blah, blah. This past season, like, I really believe this, as great of a season as Cole Pete had and Braden Burries had, I don't think they make the Final Four without Jaden Bradley. Jaden Bradley was the steady hand, a guy who late in the game or in, clutch moments, you could put the ball in his hands. You knew what he was going to do. He was going to go get downhill, get to the mid-range, and he's going to hit a mid-range jumper in your face 7 times out of 10. Like, he was a guy who was a mid-range assassin. And what I'm thinking about with him is that he was a huge part of the defensive identity of Arizona, the way that he guarded with Karchenkov and having Krivas behind them. He was huge for them. And the fact that he's so composed late in games, like, I feel like that kind of matches with the energy of this Knicks team, a guy who, as a third or fourth guard, you're going to feel good about playing with your second unit, who can handle the ball, get you into your sets, and a guy that I think is eventually going to be able to shoot it from 3 as well. Not a great lights out shooter yet, but he can eventually become a good one. And once again, like with Alvarado having the player option this year for 4.5, we just don't know, right? Like, that's I want to say that he's going to come back, but who knows, right? Like, what if he decides to find more money elsewhere? It's a real possibility, especially after getting his chip with his hometown team. Maybe
and being a factor too. It wasn't like he was just he. I mean, those Brunson minutes in that game one when Brunson went down with the ankle. I mean, that may have saved us too. Like, that's a very underrated part of our championship run. Is those minutes were very important, and he kept us steady, even in the comeback too.
We don't come back without him. Yep. Yeah. So Bradley's one guy that I like. And another guy who's similar, not in certain, just similar in terms of like he might be there in this range, is like Jacoby Gillespie from Tennessee. Obviously a smaller guy as well, but like, I don't know. I think he's like the sneaky good athlete, creative finishing ability at the rim. He's got some good decel stuff with him, the way that he can get guys off of him. But I don't know. Like, I just feel like he was a 4-year guy, played at different places. He was over 2 steals a game too, just like as an interesting another guard that you add. And like, also realistically, I just don't know how this team feels about Tyler Kolek. Like, maybe they
hurts my
thought,
heart too, man. I love Tyler, but I feel the same. Like, we had those minutes early in the season where he was cooking, and it felt like, okay, they finally got him, and then it just Mike Brown was just up, and I think I think they like him, but I think they're just like, all right, we're in championship mode. We can't try to develop guys on the go. We need someone steady, and that's why they got Alvarado. So I think they like him, but I think they're still like, okay, especially to be the backup point guard in case Brunson does go down. We don't know if we trust him quite yet. So there's still some skepticism probably with him, but I love Tyler. I'm on a Tyler hive.
No, I agree. When Kolek was in the draft, I was like, I want him to go first round. I was like, all day, any day.
I would love to flip it. Put Coleman in the second round, and if it was Tyler in the first, I would have been ecstatic. But
I agree with that. And so we don't know, right, what's going to happen overall. But if they come back with Kolek and Alvarado, then I don't know, maybe Bradley doesn't make as much sense, or maybe he does because he's a guy who could just play his role. So I like that one too.
All right. So before we close out, and now I appreciate the time, and you're your stuff, bro, and that's why I've had you had you on the pod, and that's why I said I want you to come on the KFTV draft show to let the people know about everything about the draft process and all. Just throw me some names that maybe won't get drafted that you kind of like overall, not even just Nick specific, but just some guys that you think that you like that potentially could go outside the top 60.
That's a tough one. Let me think. Well, okay. So one name that we didn't talk about that I think is interesting, who will get drafted, like 99% sure, Sergio De La Rea coming over
That's
from
the name. A
Spain.
lot of people talking
He's
about
an
him.
interesting guy. Like watching him play, he's kind of weird. Like I feel like when I watch him play, it feels like I'm watching my uncle at LA Fitness. Um, there's not a lot of explosion to his game. He's like a very slow, methodical type of player, but he's interesting. Like he can really pass the ball. He's 6'6". The shooting is interesting. He shot the ball well off the dribble the last couple of years in Spain. So there's some interesting stuff there. I just he's not like the most fun to watch, but then also like the playmaking stuff is fun. So he's like a really interesting name overall. I don't know. I think he's interesting. Another name who I think will get drafted, but wasn't really in the conversation till like the combine is Baba Miller.
I feel like he's been in the draft circle for like 4 years. Like one point he's gonna be a top fight. He's like what Wemby was. People thought have Wemby at, and like he bounced around a little bit. But yeah, Baba's been in the draft sphere for a while.
I mean, back in 22, we thought Baba was going to be a one and done guy. Like some people actually thought that coming out of Spain, and he spent 4 years in college with three different teams, finishing his time at Cincinnati. But he had a good year, and he finished averaging a double double, 13 and 10. There's some like interesting like shooting stuff with him. Like, can he eventually become a shooter? Like, he can handle the ball a little bit at his size. Like, there's like weird traits to him where
Yeah.
you go like, oh, could he be interesting? I don't know. I think Baba is a name to monitor. A couple more like Tyler Nickel. You
Oh,
know,
that's my God. He can shoot
yeah,
that.
you like him a
He
lot,
can't do
right?
anything else. That man can shoot the basketball. I don't care. Don't do anything else, Tyler. He
Uh,
just shoot that thing.
yeah, I think he's interesting. Obviously, a guy like well, he might go first round, but a guy like who had an ACL injury in Richie Saunders from BYU, I think he's a lights out player, man. Like I think he can not just shoot the ball, but like he plays with toughness. Like he can get downhill a little bit that people don't really give him credit for. So I think he's interesting. There are a lot of interesting names, and I don't really know. And like nowadays, like in the second round, all the agents like they pull their strings and they'll have some of their guys like go undrafted on purpose and all this stuff. So I don't really know who's not going to get drafted, but those are some interesting names that I've been thinking about recently. Guys like Dylan Mitchell, right? Like he's interesting, defensive guy, versatile, blah, blah, blah. He may get drafted. He may not. I have no idea anymore, but those are some guys that come to mind. Oh, the last one who Nick fans might feel, I'm not sure how they'll feel about him, but like a kind of like, because he's got such a fun like highlight mixtape and like a Trayvon Brazil type of guy. Like you look at him, pogo stick, a guy who, once again, you turn on his highlights, you go, oh, it's a first round pick type of guy, and yet I don't really know where he's going to end up, but a guy who is interesting.
He's another one like like Baba like a few years back. Like I remember the Maui Invitational a few years back, and I was like, I remember talking to Steven Gillespie, your guy. Like I was like, this kid might be like a lottery pick. He's good. And then, he got hurt and then, things, but he definitely got some, got back to form and, definitely I think could be a potential second round pick, but he's definitely, he was another name that felt like he's been in the draft, sphere for a few years, but, definitely played back, but played good this year. But Al, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you coming on the show and showing the Knicks fans, a little bit of what you do, the insight you've provided, and just the great stuff you guys do at No Ceilings, man. It's been a pleasure for you to come on the pod, and like I said, it's a different type of pod than we would have done maybe for the last few years, where we're really stressed out because we know, oh man, can we get a big? Who's gonna help? Who could play alongside Brunson? Can we get a big? And that's gonna really change and help. Now it's it's like I said, it's definitely a different fear. It's more relaxed. We're not stressed out, not tense. We feel good. You know, we trust the front office. We trust Leon. We officially trust him. You know, so it's definitely good vibes. You know, the draft's not going to be as stressful as it's been, you know, for a long time for us. So, but Al, I appreciate you coming on the show, man.
No, I really appreciate it. Being a Knicks fan my whole life, and obviously following Knicks Fan TV, loyal fan of everything that you guys do. Being able to be on the pod with you today is awesome. And like you said, it's a weird position to be in, thinking about the draft and looking at the draft in the way that we are now as defending champs. It feels amazing. And so, go Knicks.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's go Knicks. Appreciate everyone in the chat, you know, for dropping some names and coming on and you know, for this last hour and just getting an understanding more about potential prospects, you know, overall, and some prospects that we could potentially see in New York. I picked 24, 31, 55, you know, who knows? They trade up, they trade down. We shall see. But appreciate you guys for, you know, letting me host. You know, I'm coming off the bench like Tyler Kolek, you know, like at the NBA Cup and doing my thing, you know, but I appreciate everyone, you know, for coming on and showing some love. Like I said, that's Al. I'm Chris. Appreciate everyone. Knicks Fan TV. Appreciate y'all. Peace out, guys.